Hi, welcome to another session of Revit Family Academy. What we're going to be covering is creating filled patterns in Revit. Generally, filled patterns are not created; they're brought in from, well, they can be created, but brought in from AutoCAD PAT files. Generally, for filled patterns, I can just create very simple filled patterns with lines, X distance, Y distance, or spacing, 90, but can't really create anything complex in here, crosshatch it, that's it. How to make a custom one, you have to, this is where you import the PAT file from AutoCAD. Okay, but if you want to make them, create the actual files, draft them, create them in Revit, you can do that. To do that, we're going to be using a program, an add-in for Revit, 2012, 13, I think 11. There's an add-in for it from a person named Gregory Martins. He created a tool called Hatch 22 that can be found here. Okay, it's a free program. There's no advertising, things like that. The only thing they ask is donation. But it's a great program. The only one of its kind that I know of right now for an add-in. Again, add-ins, after you install it, will be located under add-ins and right here. Okay, and we'll go over that. So again, create fill pattern. So I'm going to go to my first example here. Okay, and a couple notes. So first off, you need to download and install Hatch 22 add-in, and then set up your line. So these are just drafted lines here. I need this to be a hatch pattern. Okay, so just regular lines. Now, so first off, you got to make a pattern that makes sense. Meaning, if I copy this, so what I've done, I'll just paste my little box in. So this is just a regular box here. So this is my pattern, for instance. So if I went ahead and delete this, delete that, and let's say trim this out here. Okay, so if I copy this, this is where I test my pattern. If I copied this from, let's say here to here, does it start looking like it's repeating correctly? Yes, it does. Okay, so that's, I gotta make sure my pattern works before I even go into this. So can I put a box around it, repeat so it looks like a hatch pattern or a filled pattern would be repeating? Yes, it does. So that's just me testing it. Okay, so I'm gonna undo that. Okay, and I'm going to leave that. Again, these are all just regular drafted lines, nothing special in a drafting view. And generally, I'll draw this at a 1-to-1 scale, just so you know. This is 4 millimeters, I believe, something like that. Other things to do is you can't draw circles when you're creating hatch patterns. If you need a circle, then create something like a high faceted polygon. So some polygon with like 30 sides or something like that. So it's all straight line segments, no curves or anything like that in your hatch pattern. That's one of the limitations. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this. So first off, what we're going to do is go to add-ins and click on that program, Martins 3D Hatch 22. Click on that. And what we're going to do is the first thing is we're going to do is we're going to create our subregion. So here we got to create our line types. So that's the first thing you got to do before we do anything. I'm going to click on that and I'll see something like this and just hit OK, the dialog box, and hit done. So all it does really is it'll create on your annotation detail lines, it'll just create these lines. And really what we're going to use is just 3 types. We're going to use boundary, continuous, and dashed. So boundary is kind of saying what is my box I'm using to say this is my pattern. Okay. And continuous, or sorry, dashed is going to be objects like this guy and this guy. I'm going to put that on dashed. Okay. It's a break in the pattern, so it's called dashed. And then we'll cover continuous. We don't have here yet, but we'll cover that. Okay. So first off, as I create my line types, now I'm going to move my boundary over. I'm going to hover over it, hit tab, select, and I'm going to change my line type. Right now it's thin lines to boundary. And you'll see the color change. I'll hit escape a few times, and now this is a boundary line. Okay. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is, you can see I've trimmed my pattern up here. That's what you need to do. You can't have this pattern extending over. It's got to be trimmed. So I'm going to now select all my objects here, and I'm going to move those to my dashed. Okay, and those, hit escape, those change as well. So now those are changed over. I'm ready to create my pattern using the program. Okay, so what I'm going to do is highlight all this in preparation to use the program. Then I'm going to go to add-ins and click on the program, Hatch 22. And all I simply do is give it a name. I'll call this, try. And I'll click on make hatch from selection. Again, this needs to be selected here. Okay. And I'll just go make hatch from selection. Click on that. Done. So it makes all this pen up, pen down situations for creating your hatch. And one thing I forgot to mention is the type of hatch. So here we're creating a drafting hatch. That's default. A model hatch would be if I want to create something like an actual modeled true size hatch. So like brick. Brick would be 100 millimeter by 200 millimeter, or 2-inch by 4-inch brick. You don't want that to change. You want to stay consistent on your model. Then you'll use a modeled hatch. Otherwise, the same process happens, but right now this is just a drafted hatch, which will change using your annotation scale. So right now I made this at 4 millimeters, I think, and here. So change my annotation scale 10, that would change. Okay, so again, by default it's drafted hatch. Otherwise you can say modeled hatch. Okay, so I made my hatch. It made that file. Now the next thing I do is I want to save this PAT file so I can bring it into Revit. Okay, so so I made hatch, brought this back. Sometimes you get the odd error here. It'll come up with a dialog box. I would continue the process. 90% of the time it still works. Okay, so I'm going to click Save Pat File and save it to somewhere where you can find it again. So I'm going to put on my documents called try, save. Do I want to create it? Yes, I do, and I'll hit done. That's done. So now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create that hatch. To do that, I got to go to Manage, go to my additional settings, and fill patterns. Okay, and I'm going to create a drafted. Oops. All right, and create a drafted pattern because that's what I created here using that program. So I'm going to go new. I'm not going to put a name in here. I'm just going to go right to custom and import. Okay, and I'll go ahead and find that PAT file I just created and hit open. And you can see it kind of gives you a little display here. And you have the chance to change the name at this point. So maybe I want to type in the full name here. It doesn't matter. Okay, triangle. That's going to be the name that appears in here. Okay, and that's your import scale. So if I do this at 4 millimeters, it's going to come in at 4 millimeters at 1:1. This is your chance to say, 2 or 0.25, that kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to leave it as 1. Hit OK. There's triangle. Hit OK. The pattern is now created. So to use it, it's simply how I use filled patterns. in Revit. So I go to Annotate, and I simply go to my regions, and here's my real. So I've got to make a filled region. So I'm going to edit this type and duplicate it and call it my triangle. And I'll change the fill pattern to use my newly created pattern down here. So hit T to find the first triangle. Here we go. Not a good picture, but okay to that. Triangle, opaque, I'll leave it all default. Hit okay to that. And I'll draw my, I'll draw my shape to have it get filled and hit finish. And there's my newly created filled region using my pattern. Okay, so next thing what I do is one more thing missing is, I'll leave this here for now, but I'm going to go to, I want to have a line going through this. So this was using a pattern, great, but what I want to do, for this other view here, so I want to have these lines, kind of like if I was using these are basically continuous lines, okay, going out through there. So this would be a continuous line through my hatch pattern. So I want to create this again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my little square here again. Control C that and go to here. And I'm just going to paste my box back in here. Paste, current view. Okay, so I want to make this same hatch again, but I want these to part of my design going through it. So I just drew these, and you'll do the same thing. You'll copy this over to test your pattern. So again, I'm going to prepare this by just trimming this up. And trim. Trim that. And the rest I'll delete. Okay, so this is the, oops, I didn't want to delete that. I'll just draw that line back in. This is my pattern. Again, same thing. I'll copy this and test my pattern out. So I can delete this, but again, we don't have to clean this up. So that's my pattern. So now I'm going to go back to the program. Again, in my notes here, make sure you save often in between steps, because sometimes the program will crash, lock your Revit up, you lost your hatches. So except for your saved PAT file. So it's a generally good idea to save. Anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and pick my add-ins and Martin's hatch 22. I already created, I don't have to create the subregions anymore. That's a one-time process in this project. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, oops, I missed a step. Cancel that. I can go through the same steps as select my box around here, change that to, again, boundary, turns red. Next thing I'm going to do is select all my areas in here except for, I'm going to shift and click on to get rid of out of my selection. I just want those triangles. I'm going to move those triangles again to dash. Those are dashed. Okay. And they will change color now. And these last two, click those, and I'm going to move those to continuous. Okay, these are continuous. They'll continue through your hatch. Okay, now that's done. So that's a continuous line. It doesn't have to be horizontal, but in this case, this is my hatch I want. So I'm going to select all this and go ahead and create my hatch using the add-in program. And I'll call this try to. Make hatch pattern from selection. Again, must be selected. Okay. Done. And save my pattern. Triangle 2. Great. Save yes. Done. Okay. So it's created. Now I have to bring that into my program and do and call it TRI. Oh yeah, I don't have to name it here yet. Import. And go down here, try to see it there. Let's just take a look at it at a different scale. Yep. So leave it at 1. And let's call it, my triangle 2. Okay to that. There it is. And again, drafted pattern, hit OK to that. So I want to use it now. So I'm just going to go back up here to this one because I already created this hatch area. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to edit. And I'm going to duplicate this triangle 2. I'll give this 2, a different name. And I'll use my new pattern here, my triangle 2. Hit OK to that. Hit OK to that. Okay, so you can see what it's doing here. This is a continuous line, okay, and this is my dashed, and that's it. Thanks for watching.